Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to the channel. We have some breaking news, a massive welterweight fight announcement. Shavkat Rakhmonov versus Kelvin Gastelum. This will be the co-main event on September 16th, the UFC Fight Night card, which will be headlined by Alexa Grasso versus Valentina Shevchenko 2. And this is going to be my reaction and early prediction for this massive welterweight fight. And also, Dana White announced this in a social media video, and he said something in that video that I massively disagree with, and we're going to talk about it in this video as well. But my initial reaction to this news is it was kind of expected. This was a fight that both guys have kind of been clamoring for the last month or two, and in a way it made no sense, but in a way it made perfect sense as well, and we're going to talk about that. But I love this matchup. I think this is a very fun fight. I think both guys are very intriguing, especially Kelvin Gastelum coming down to the welterweight division, which a lot of people have been saying for a while he needs to go back down to welterweight. But, I mean, this fight, no matter what happens, this fight will be exciting. I would watch Shavkat Rakhmonov. At this point, I would watch him destroy Sam Alvey. I love watching Shavkat Rakhmonov fight. If you look at the guy's record, he is 17-0, undefeated. Every single one of those 17 wins via finish. He has 8 knockouts, 9 submissions. That is insanity. When have we ever seen that? To go undefeated and win all your fights by finishes? And he's kind of in a weird spot because, in my opinion, you could make an argument for a title shot for Shavkat Rakhmonov. And instead, the welterweight division is kind of in a weird spot. The welterweight division has honestly been a horrible division in terms of fights actually happening between contenders over the last few years. But in the last year or two, it started to kind of make some headway in that respect. But it seemed like for years, none of the top contenders wanted to fight other top contenders. And the only guy who was fighting top contenders was Kamaru Usman. And in a way right now, the division's kind of logjam. Shavkat Rakhmonov really didn't have an opponent because if you look at the division right now, Leon Edwards is the champion. Kamaru Usman's sitting at number 1. There was talks of Shavkat Rakhmonov versus Kamaru Usman. I never thought that would happen, and obviously it's not happening. Then you have Colby Covington sitting at number 2, who Dana White has already basically guaranteed the next title shot, even though he has not one single win over somebody currently in the top 15 of the rankings. And also, I know people say he's a draw. I've went over this ad nauseum. He's not a draw. Just because he gets social media clicks does not make him a draw. It wouldn't surprise me if Leon Edwards versus Colby Covington ends up in a co-main event. We can call him Colby co-main event Covington. But he's getting the next title shot according to Dana White. Every day that slips by, I start to wonder if that's actually going to happen. But then you get to number 3, Belal Muhammad. Belal Muhammad arguably already deserves a title shot. So Belal Muhammad's already on this long win streak, and then he stepped in on a couple weeks' notice to take on Gilbert Burns and outclass Gilbert Burns. There's no denying him a title shot at that point. So Belal Muhammad is basically going to sit out and wait, and there's a chance maybe if Colby doesn't want to fight on a certain timeline that the UFC wants, maybe Belal Muhammad gets the next title shot. So Belal's not going to fight Shavkat Rakhmonov, which they talked about before Belal took on Burns at UFC 288. And then you get down to number 4, Khamzat Chimaev. One thing that makes me infuriated, I would love to see Khamzat Chimaev versus Shavkat Rakhmonov. That is my dream fight. I think if I can make one fight in the UFC right now, it'd be Chimaev versus Rakhmonov. I think that's a fight that all the hardcore fans want to see, and that would be such an incredible matchup. But Khamzat Chimaev, too busy hanging out with a Chechen warlord. I don't believe he can get into the United States right now. And on top of that, supposedly he's moving up to middleweight. He can't make weight. He couldn't make weight to slaughter Nate Diaz. There's been rumors that he's going to fight at middleweight. He's been calling everyone out. The UFC hasn't been making any fights. Nonetheless, he's not fighting Shavkat. Then you get down to Gilbert Burns. Gilbert Burns coming off an injury, lost to Belal Muhammad. That fight's not going to happen. And then you get to Shavkat at number 6, Wonderboy at number 7. Wonderboy, if you even remotely ever wrestled, if you wrestled in elementary school, Wonderboy will turn down a fight with you. They tried to make the Shavkat versus Wonderboy fight multiple times. Wonderboy said, absolutely no way I'm taking that fight. And he's currently scheduled to fight Michel Pereira. And then you get down to Jeff Neal. He just beat Jeff Neal. You get down to Sean Brady. He has a fight. Vicente Luque has a fight. And then you're starting to get outside the top 10. And a lot of these guys have matchups anyway. And, you know, even number 11, Neil Magny, Shavkat's already beaten. So Shavkat was kind of in no man's land because he really didn't have anybody to potentially fight. And he fought in March. And he probably wanted to fight before the end of the year, at least fight twice this year. And so the Kelvin Gastelum fight made perfect sense. Kelvin Gastelum up at middleweight, hanging out at middleweight for a while, said he wanted to go back down to welterweight, try his hand at welterweight. And the Shavkat Rakhmonov fight is a fight that both of them showed interest in. And a lot of people have been saying for a while, Kelvin Gastelum, you need to go down to welterweight. Kelvin Gastelum had no business being at middleweight. I know Kelvin Gastelum's claim to fame, you know, he put it in his rap song on his YouTube that he had a close fight. He took it to Adesanya. Dude's riding off the coattails of a fight that he lost years ago. That's an embarrassment, in my opinion. And Kelvin Gastelum hasn't really taken his career seriously. You look at his last few fights, he has a win over Chris Curtis, but that's a controversial win. We'll talk about it in a second. But overall, winning 2 out of his last 7, that is insanity. He has lost 5 out of his last 7 fights. Lost to Jared Cannonier, lost to Robert Whittaker, lost to Jack Hermanson, lost to Darren Till, lost to Israel Adesanya. They're not horrible losses to have. And, you know, but just to only have a win over Ian Heinisch and then have a controversial win over Chris Curtis, I actually thought he lost the Chris Curtis fight. And especially with the headbutt being removed in the second round, there's no way he wins that fight, in my opinion. There's absolutely no way he wins that fight. So he gets a win over Chris Curtis, but Chris Curtis, even at the time, was ranked like number 14 or 15 in the middleweight division. So this was perfect for Gastelum in a way, because now he gets to go down to welterweight. And instead of fighting his way up the rankings, he already gets the number 6 guy. And I'm not one of these people who's like a rankings purist where, oh, if they're in this ranking, they have to fight this guy. Or if they're unranked, they can't fight a ranked guy. I'm not one of those people, because the rankings are made up by a bunch of nameless, anonymous people online that we don't even know who's actually making the rankings. But this is a great fight for Kelvin Gastelum if he can win it, because he goes from essentially being, where's he at sitting at currently in the middleweight rankings? He's sitting at number 12. He gets a big step up to fight number 6 in the rankings at welterweight. If he can beat Shavkat Rakhmonov, he's going to be right up there in that welterweight title contention. And Kelvin Gastelum, the success he had at middleweight for a brief time, if he can replicate that at welterweight, and he looked good against like Tyron Woodley back before Tyron Woodley was even a champion, if he can have that success at welterweight, he could make a run at a title. A lot of people thought that he has the skills to make a run at a title, but that is all bearing on him being able to get past Shavkat Rakhmonov, which is going to be a very tough test. I'm happy that Gastelum is going down. I'm happy that he's fighting Shavkat. I'm happy that Shavkat has a fight. And even though Shavkat is fighting a guy who's not in the welterweight division right now, who's not ranked high even in the middleweight division, Shavkat can get a win here against a name in Kelvin Gastelum and also stay busy. Because if he doesn't fight Kelvin, if Kelvin doesn't want to fight him, who else is he going to fight right now? There's really not a fight for him. So that would mean Shavkat waiting till maybe early 2024 till his next fight. So I am so grateful that this fight is happening. And say what you will about Kelvin Gastelum, he fights in exciting fights. All his matchups are pretty much exciting. Chris Curtis fight was exciting. Jared Cannonier fight was exciting. And I actually thought you could make an argument that he beat Jared Cannonier. The Robert Whittaker fight, he took on short notice. He got outclassed, fair enough. The Ian Heinisch fight wasn't particularly good. The Jack Hermanson fight, he got submitted in the first round. The Darren Till fight, I thought you could make an argument he won that fight as well. And then the Adesanya fight, of course, that was one of the greatest middleweight title fights of all time. So I think Kelvin Gastelum coming down against Shavkat Rakhmonov, the boogeyman of the welterweight division, in my opinion, this fight on paper should be a super exciting matchup. And what's amazing about this is it's the co-main event of a UFC Fight Night card. This will be a free card. You know, I say free in quotes because it's on ESPN Plus, so technically you have to pay for ESPN Plus, but this will not be a pay-per-view. This will be the Alexa Grasso versus Valentina Shevchenko 2 card, which is on Mexico's Independence Day, or Mexican Independence Day. And, you know, so they're putting a good co-main event. This is a great co-main event in the welterweight division. It has stakes within the division, and it should be an exciting fight. I'm really looking forward to this matchup. I'm glad Shavkat's getting a fight. You know, a year where Shavkat was sitting out, I would hate to see that, considering what an exciting fighter he is. And I hope if Shavkat wins this fight, depending on how the division plays out, I want to see him fighting for a title in 2024. You know, Leon Edwards, let's say he beats Colby. Then Bilal's next in line. Even if Colby beats Leon, I want to see Bilal versus Colby. Then I want Shavkat up next if he beats Kelvin Gastelum, or maybe he fights one more fight in between there against another contender. I think that kind of makes perfect sense. But as far as an early prediction for this matchup, I think Shavkat Rakhmonov all the way. I think Shavkat Rakhmonov is going to finish Kelvin Gastelum. Kelvin Gastelum has a great opportunity here to jump into the top 10 of the welterweight rankings, even close to the top 5. But I think he's bitten off more than he can chew against Shavkat Rakhmonov. I believe Kelvin Gastelum, even though he's not particularly old, he's only 31 years old, I believe he's kind of regressing. I believe he's kind of going downhill. I believe he's slowing down a bit. And I believe you have Shavkat Rakhmonov, who's 28 years old. He's hitting the prime of his career. He's unbelievable. He's super well-rounded. And I just don't see an avenue to victory for Kelvin Gastelum. It's not like Gastelum has unbelievable KO power. It's not like he has unbelievable wrestling where he can take Shavkat down and control him on the ground and beat him up on the ground. Shavkat, in my opinion, is just too well-rounded. He's too well-rounded. He's too dangerous on the feet. He's too powerful. His striking is really good. I mean, everywhere. There's really no holes in his game outside of maybe his defensive striking. He's a little bit irresponsible on the feet. He takes a little bit too much damage, but he still finds a way to get it done. He's so good. And look at the level of competition he's fought. It's not like the elite of the elite, but pretty close in Jeff Neal. I mean, even Jeff Neal, I would consider one of the elite of the elite. Neil Magny, okay, Neil Magny does it, but he blew through Neil Magny. Carlston Harris went out there and KO'd him. Carlston Harris is better than people give him credit for. And then you look at his UFC record. Every single one of his UFC fights he's finished because every single fight in his pro MMA career he has gotten a finish in. So I just don't think Kelvin Gastelum, who's fighting Chris Curtis to a close fight, who's losing to Jarrett Cannonier, and that's not a horrible loss to have, and again, I thought he could have arguably won that, who's getting outclassed by Robert Whittaker. I don't think that Kelvin Gastelum can go down to welterweight and get the job done against a guy like Shavkat Rakhmonov. I believe the deck is stacked against Kelvin Gastelum, and honestly, I want to say my early prediction is Shavkat Rakhmonov by TKO, but I actually want to change it. My early prediction for this fight is I think Kelvin Gastelum is going to miss weight. It would not shock me. Kelvin Gastelum has always had, issues making weight at welterweight, and that's why he's fought at middleweight, because he wants to not have to cut that weight. He wants to go up 15 pounds, even though he's not suited for that weight class. So my official early prediction is Kelvin Gastelum misses weight, and maybe we don't even see this fight, but I hope that doesn't happen. I hope the fight comes to fruition, and an early prediction will be Shavkat Rakhmonov. But I absolutely love this fight. I think it'll be exciting. Kelvin Gastelum is a guy that will never quit. He never gives up. Even if he starts losing, he's still there, and he's not just surviving. We saw it in the Robert Whittaker fight. He was getting outclassed. He kept moving forward, kept looking to land shots, and was actually looking to win, where some guys kind of pack it in. Another thing I want to talk about before I end this video, Dana White said something in the announcement that kind of annoyed me a little bit. It's not that big of a deal, but I wanted to mention it in this video. He said, yeah, this is the toughest test of Shavkat Rakhmonov's career. I disagree. Jeff Neal is the toughest test of Shavkat Rakhmonov's career. I think that was a massive step up in competition to go from Neil Magny to Jeff Neal. And I know technically I think Neil Magny has a win over Jeff Neal. Jeff Neal was having health issues. Jeff Neal, over the last year or so, it seemed like he returned to the Jeff Neal that we saw in like 2019, 2018, where he looked like a future contender. So I just think taking on Jeff Neal in his prime at UFC 285 was a tougher test than Kelvin Gastelum, who's still relatively young, but has a lot of damage, has taken a lot of damage, has a lot of miles on him. And I just think Kelvin Gastelum's kind of regressing a bit. So I don't think this is the big step up that Dana White makes it out to be, but it's still a great fight, and it still is a good test for him. Kelvin Gastelum has good defensive wrestling. He has decent offensive wrestling. He has good cardio. But I do wonder, how is that weight cut going to affect him? He hasn't made that cut in how long? When's the last time he fought at welterweight? It's been all the way back, was it Tim Kennedy? No, Tim Kennedy was middleweight. He missed weight against Johnny Hendricks, so that was 2016. His last fight at welterweight was a loss to Neil Magny in 2015. It's been 8 years. That is shocking to me. It's been 8 years since Kelvin Gastelum has fought at welterweight. Kelvin Gastelum's going to miss weight, guys. I want you to remember this video. Kelvin Gastelum will miss weight, but hopefully the fight still moves forward, even though he misses weight by a pound or two, and they still have this fight. And for a co-main event, this is a damn good co-main event for a UFC Fight Night card, a free card on ESPN Plus if you pay for the subscription. To have this as a co-main event, especially when we're getting main events like Mackenzie Dern versus Angela Hill earlier this year, to have Kelvin Gastelum versus Shavkat Rakhmonov as a co-main event, they're going to stack this card. It wouldn't shock me if maybe they put on another bigger fight on this card, because they want to make the September 16th card a big UFC Fight Night card. And I love this. It's going to be at the T-Mobile Arena. They have to sell tickets. They're going to put some big fights on this card. And I think this is a great co-main event. I mean, this is one of the better co-main events we've seen for a UFC Fight Night card. This is a perfect fight. This could have been the main event. Honestly, I know they're doing the women's title fight, Alexa Grasso versus Valentina Shevchenko too, but I honestly believe there's more interest in a Shavkat Rakhmonov versus Kelvin Gastelum fight for this card. And this matchup, in my opinion, it's just timing, everything coming together on perfect timing because Shavkat doesn't have a fight. He needs a fight. He deserves at least a name, if not a decent ranking. Kelvin Gastelum fits that. And then Kelvin Gastelum, he kind of had a name for himself. He looked good at welterweight for a while. He won the Ultimate Fighter at the welterweight weight class, or actually it might have been middleweight, and then he went down to welterweight and had success, I think. And then, he's returning to the weight class, and he kind of wants a big fight as well, and he kind of gets that because he gets to fight the number 6 guy in the welterweight division. So I'm glad all this is coming together. I have to applaud the UFC for great matchmaking when I see it. I know a lot of people are like, oh, you're always complaining about the UFC. I have to applaud this matchmaking. I love this fight. But I do not believe this is the toughest test of Shavkat Rakhmonov's career. I think the toughest test was Jeff Neal. And maybe Kelvin Gastelum will prove me wrong. And maybe this fight will be a lot tougher. But I think Shavkat Rakhmonov gets it done. And I hope one day, some way, somehow, please MMA gods, I want Shavkat Rakhmonov versus Khamzat Chimaev at some point in time over the next 2 to 3 years. I would kill to see that matchup. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Don't forget to like the video. Don't forget to subscribe. And thank you so much for watching.